Have you ever had one of those days where it felt like you were unstoppable? Everything that came up, you had an answer for, or you were able to solve it right away. And then you'd have other days where it felt like no matter how much you tried to get something done, it just felt like it was never getting done. Everything that came up just kept going. Couldn't finish any task. I was listening to a video the other day, and the speaker was discussing a mental model for motivation. I think it would be the best way to phrase it. But the mental model was an answer for those two different types of days that I often have experienced for myself. The idea is if you want to stay motivated, you need to close loops. For example, a very simple loop would be you walk through your house taking a break from work and you notice that there are some dirty dishes in the sink. You could say, I'm too busy. I need to come back to it later when work is over. But now you're thinking about the dishes that you need to do when you're done with work, and that's just sitting in your mind all. Whereas if you just went and did the dirty dishes during your break, then the rest of your workday no longer has that open loop. It builds motivation, it builds momentum. So if you want to stay motivated, close loops. This concept of open loops actually reminded me of an idea I started thinking through. I have like a note in my Notion workspace that I called active processes or open processes, and it's the same concept. So today, let's talk about open processes. This is episode 1 of Strong Opinions Weekly Held. Let's do it! All right, episode 1. The first strong opinion, like I said, strong opinions is kind of just like I just thought the phrase was really punny, so I had to use it. They are strong opinions weekly held in that I am beginning to form opinions on the things that I want to discuss, but nothing is set in stone. So I want to talk through my ideas behind these different things, and I think this is like the perfect place to do it because y'all are going to reply back in the threads. We're going to have a good conversation about it for each ideas, and I get to refine these ideas together with y'all and can kind of form better opinions after talking. As I mentioned in the intro, the idea that we're kind of going to be talking through is this idea of having open processes or active processes. And the big I guess idea that I had, the opinion that I have is that the more active processes that you have, the less effective you are with each process. Because when you have open-ended open-ended processes running in your head, it is so easy for the ones that you're not focusing on at the moment to force themselves into the forefront. A lot of times it can be an inconvenient time. Sometimes it's not inconvenient, but I've noticed personally that the more times I'm trying to hold open-ended problems or open-ended tasks or things that need to get done in my head, it just causes stress. And a lot of times it causes rabbit holing where something will trigger one of those open-ended processes and it will like divert from whatever I'm currently doing and go down the rabbit hole of fixing that other one, which can be fun. Especially with my personality. But a lot of times it's like a distraction and means I don't get things that I wanted to get done for that day. Or a lot of times when I have a lot of open processes going, it shows itself in not necessarily work stuff. So sometimes it's work stuff. But generally when I sit down at my desk, it's pretty easy to stay focused. Some days I'm not. But you start a task, especially with development and design, and it's to just get in but what happens is when I have an open process that I don't close, when I get done with work, that process is still churning in my head in time where I shouldn't be churning on it. And it shows itself in being forgetful for tasks that I'm responsible for with my family, things my wife's asking me. A running joke in my family that I never close cabinets. And the reason I never close cabinets is because I'm either jumping to the next thing in my mind, to another process, another idea, or something I'm while I'm doing this manual task around the kitchen, my mind is somewhere else. My mind is thinking through a different process. And that's just something that I noticed. And so what me to realize is that those days where I feel unstoppable, the days where I feel like I'm just like getting things done, I'm on top. It's where when I starting, I close that process down and complete it. Now that doesn't always mean like completed in the sense that I did the thing, it is done. I don't have to look at it again, but I have gotten it out of my head. A lot of people, I think, talk about this in the way of like, that's why they keep personal to-do lists, or like at work, whether it's like linear tickets or whatever, where it's like, I've got this thing that I need to do. I'm going to break it down into smaller tasks and I'm going to put it somewhere else. That way, that is where the process is living. It's not living in my head. And when I am ready to go work on it, then I open those processes again and I can finish them, put them back. I like that idea. That's like a pretty good one. But I think there's also just like a process of pruning things that are going on in your head, that you're trying to hold all at the same time. I know for me personally, I'm trying to do so many things at once. And I find myself forcefully context switched. Sometimes it's because I've got like Twitter X notifications on for different people. And I see them post and it triggers some process that has been lying dormant and suddenly I'm off track. That could be a social media problem. It could be a number of things, but there's this idea of if that process that was in my head I had just already resolved, then I would doing it. But it's this idea of like, you need to be pruning these processes out. You hear a lot of times, you need to say no more. It's talked about as focus. So there's like two sides of that coin that I just kind of want to like wrap up on, that are kind of like open-ended ideas, which is Aaron Francis talks about this being in his era of maximum effort. There we go. Got it. But there is this space that you can be in your life where you want to be taking on a lot. You want to be trying to do a lot. And that lends itself to having a lot of open processes, which can be good. But then the flip side of it, if you have your focus spread so broadly, each process is getting less resources. So on the other end of the spectrum, if you only have a single process ramping up, I was listening to Dax and Adam on the Tomorrow.fm podcast the other day, and they talked about this concept unrelated to like this topic, but more related to the CrowdStrike crash and software companies in general, that when you're paying for full-time developers, you're paying for more resources. You're paying for redundancy. And so there's this flip side of the coin, which is if you don't have a clear goal, like if you don't have an idea of like where you want to be going next, maybe having fewer processes so that you have available resources to pour into something when it's spotted is not a bad thing. It means that when a real opportunity shows up, if you've said yes to a bunch of opportunities, you have a bunch of processes running for things that you don't feel very strongly about, then you don't have the capacity or the availability to go all in when an opportunity you're extremely excited about shows up, or that opportunity shows up and you've now got to decide if you are going to shut down those other processes, those other commitments. And sometimes that could be damaging. So there's this idea of like balance. You want to prune processes, you want to complete and tie together open processes and close the loop on them. Sometimes you just need to say no to them, But having too few processes can mean you've got a lot of capacity that's being wasted. But having fewer processes could mean you have the capacity to scale up when you find something you're really wanting to put your attention in on. I actually had this happen to me recently. Throughout my career, I've always worked. So I'm designer, software engineer, and I used to work with my cousin in law. He has like an agency, and I would do like WordPress design and development for these like marketing sites. That was awesome at the start of my career because I got a lot of extra cash that I needed for doing like not as exciting work for local businesses, but it was good money, and that was like what I needed at the time. As my career went on, what I found myself able to do was to like say, like, well, I'm now working on these things professionally. This is no longer something that fits into like a process that I want to have open. So I closed the process down with my cousin, and then I just took some time off to focus on what my new path was. And that freed me up creatively in ways that I wasn't expecting, because when you've got so many open processes going, you don't you don't realize sometimes opportunities or things that you're missing. And that's what I realized as soon as I said no to the process, that by default I just had kept open because it worked, and it wasn't like necessarily a bad process. But by closing that process, I started working on my blog, started working on sharing more things publicly, working on projects just for fun, like exploring new ideas, exploring new designs, interactions, things of that nature, and like exploring my own style with design. And that has led to just so many more interesting projects, friendships, and I just think that sometimes if we've had processes that are open for too long, that we just accept as, well, this is just a process that I have, that you can miss out on processes that processes, opportunities, yeah, like whatever.